Hello and welcome to this Red Gaming Tech video, myself and Marta, where I'm here as always with the latest from the tech world in the last 24 or so hours. Now as usual I have quite a lot to get through today, but the first thing that I do want to discuss is actually regarding Intel and the 9th generation. Now of course we are pretty much expecting a release or launch, should I say, in October for the 3 flagship chips of this particular generation, with the rest arriving in 2019. So what we actually see here is an early listing on a Vietnamese website, a tech retailer, to be exact, by the name of Huawei Computer, and they have listed the 9th generation Coffee Lake ARM processors from Intel. So we do see the 9900K, the i9 Plus 9900K to be exact, the i7 Plus 9700K and the i5 Plus 9600K. But we also see some more details on the rest of the lineup as well. Obviously we've discussed the 9900K at length, and we've talked a fair bit about the 96 and 9700K. So we also see here the i5 Plus 9600, i5 Plus 9500, 9400 and the i3 Plus 9100. So we do have some spec lists here as well, so we do see quite a bit of information here. Now of course we've had a bunch of leaks surrounding these processors, and of course while this information should by no means be taken as gospel, it does kind of confirm previously revealed information, and we can start to, based on not only this information but on previous benchmarks and so on, get a picture of what we can expect in terms of the performance. So the 9900K is going to have a base clock of 3.6 GHz, with the i5 Plus 9600 weighing in at 3.1, the i9500 at 3, the 9400 at 2.9, and the 9100 at 3.7. Now, of course, the main thing that I think is going to determine whether or not the 9th generation is going to be worth it for a lot of people is the all-important question of how much it's going to cost. Because, obviously, the CPUs that Intel are challenging here with the 9th generation is, of course, Ryzen the 2nd generation, 2600X and so on and so forth. So Intel has to get the price versus performance right, because obviously, Ryzen pretty much crushes it in that regard. It brings you a lot of performance for a fairly reasonable price, especially considering what you are actually getting. So we do need to see the price be chosen wisely from Intel. But of course, we're going to have to wait and see. But it definitely has the potential to challenge it in terms of performance. But obviously, if it's much more expensive, then obviously kind of having the same argument again that we've had between Intel and AMD for quite some time now, where that, Intel wins out in some areas with, say, the 8700K, but obviously, even though it's a fairly old CPU now, it's still fairly expensive, and obviously they haven't brought anything new to the table, really, that can really challenge it, so they do need to get that right, in my opinion. But let's move on to, speaking of them, AMD. Now, of course, just recently we discussed how Intel are having to move the H310 chipset over to the 22nm process to help ease the pressure that is currently being put on the very stretched-in 14nm, as of course every Intel CPU ever, it feels like, does use that particular architecture, and they are having supply issues. Now, we've discussed numerous times now the effect this is having on shipments and obviously prices and that sort of thing, and obviously AMD have pretty much a golden opportunity here. Now, what's interesting here is that we actually could see the market share for AMD gain some very significant ground against Intel amongst all these issues. According to CNBC, Jefferies has raised the target price on AMD shares from $30 to $36, and we also see the analyst Mark Lipicus points to a recent report from a research firm by the name of Fubon that apparently HP are going to be adopting AMD processors for up to 30% of its consumer machines next year. But it doesn't stop there as well. Apparently, further according to this report, we are going to be seeing Dell using more AMD chips for their commercial PC line as well. So, according to what analysts believe, AMD at least has the potential, the chance, the opportunity to triple its market share to 30%, obviously from the 10% that it currently has. So again, this is something that analysts are saying that they have the potential to do. So obviously AMD has to play their cards right and all that sort of stuff. But if these reports are true, that HP are going to be adopting AMD processors for up to 30%, and we're going to see Dell using more AMD chips as well. And obviously you got strategies from AMD themselves to position themselves strongly amongst all Intel's issues. You can kind of see how they could just grab a really tasty section of the market share pie. Now, I do have a bit of a statement here from Mark Lipicus, who said, quote, Fubon's report that Intel will undersupply the PC market between 4Q18 and 2Q19 leaves us with higher conviction that AMD will report improving revenue, prices and margins near term, and that is positioned to take share in the high-end PC, MPU and server market long term. And apparently he is very much expecting Intel's supply woes to be continuing into 2019. And did go further on to say that that 30% market share I just mentioned isn't quote-unquote out of the question. So obviously Intel are doing their best to, again, ease the pressure on the 14nm process by moving lower end chipsets away from it onto older processors with 22nm thing that I already discussed. But they still have, obviously, a lot of high-end chips that still require this. They can't move everything over to this, obviously. Again, it's affecting prices, availability, and so on and so forth. And if with longer the 10nm isn't available on the market, these issues are unfortunately only going to continue, especially as, of course, we just discussed the 9th generation, and guess what architecture that uses. So, yeah, AMD very much have a golden opportunity here. Whether or not they end up taking it, of course, well, we're going to have to wait and see, but it definitely could be a huge upset for AMD to basically run away with the baton, as it were. But let's move away from that to make another quick trip over to Camp Nvidia. Now, unsurprisingly, we have been talking an awful lot about the RTX platform and, of course, the Turing GPU architecture, and it has already been officially recognised with a technology award from the Advanced Imaging Society, or AIS. And their comments do seem mainly focused around the Quadro platform, as of course that has some pretty beastly performance that we're not going to be seeing in the gaming section of the Turing lineup, obviously, but we're still going to be seeing ray tracing, rasterization, simulation, and so on, but obviously that is going to be more in play on the Quadros, but we are of course seeing many of those features supported with flourish on the Turing. And we do have a bit of a statement here from Jim Chabin, who is the president of the AIS, and he says, quote, the AIS Technology Award annually acknowledges and celebrates technologies and processes demonstrating both innovation and impact in advancing the future of the entertainment and media industries. The AIS committee felt it important to recognise Nvidia for its new Turing architecture and RTX platform and the advancements they bring to ray tracing. This technology allows lighting and virtual environments to mimic the real world, making our virtual worlds more realistic than ever. And it wasn't just the AIS that was full of praise for the Turing architecture. We also have some comments here from Cyril Demez, the Chief Technology Officer of Algorithmic. And they said, quote, RTS technology tightly integrates ray tracing into the real-time graphics pipeline. It enables new rendering techniques that will greatly improve the quality of real-time graphics and the performance of graphical tools overall. In the case of Substance Ray Trace Bakers, we can observe an increase in speed of around 800% when compared with CPU-based ray tracing. So again, that's kind of what I'm saying, that these comments seem more targeted towards the Quadro end, because obviously they are the higher end, especially when you're talking deep learning and AI and that sort of thing. But obviously, again, we are seeing ray tracing as one of the flagship features of the 2080 Ti and, of course, the 2080. So their comments, of course, do apply to that end, but as I said, it seems more targeted towards that, because obviously that is kind of where Turing is truly unleashed in terms of what the architecture is actually capable of. So obviously they're talking about the technologies, but obviously this architecture, as we've discussed many times now, has been 10 years in the making. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing how much more Nvidia can actually get out of this architecture. Of course, we've seen them get quite a bit indeed out of Pascal, so we could see a very long future indeed from Turing. And it's going to be very interesting to see, as I've said before, the actual impact that ray tracing has on the industry, and we may see it become the next step forward in terms of graphics technology, or we may not. Of course, we do not know what the future may hold. As usual, Mystic Meg and her crystal ball nowhere to be found. So we're going to end things out on a bit of a humorous note, as Huawei, if that's how you pronounce it, have kind of thrown some shade at Apple. So recently we, of course, discussed the iPhone XS and XS Max. Now, of course, Unsurprisingly, there have been giant queues waiting for the new iPhone model because, well, it's Apple. But where this particular story actually happened was outside Apple's store on Orchard Road in Singapore, and it's actually their first store in Southeast Asia. So what's actually happened is that Huawei staff were spotted giving out free power banks to Apple fans queuing overnight to get their hands on the iPhone XS. And on the front of the power bank is written, "Here's a power bank, you'll need it, courtesy of Huawei." And what they actually were giving away was not exactly cheap. It was a power bank that sells for about 80 Singapore dollars, which is about 60 US dollars. And as I said, very much takes aim at the battery life of the Apple iPhone XS. As you may have heard, especially if you keep your ear to the ground with all things smartphones and all things Apple, the XS does come with a bit of a downgrade in terms of the capacity for the battery found in the previous generation, the iPhone X, and that is according to a recent teardown. Now, there is a slightly larger battery in the Max SS, but it is actually smaller than the one offered by the P20 Pro by Huawei. So this is, again, just a sort of fun little jab at Apple, a bit of humour to end things out. This does make me laugh, just like, here's a power bank, you'll need it, and just picture them chuckling away in the corner like Muttley from Wacky Races. So that is me done for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.